we'll do the live thing first. Like. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is me again, your host Bigmark. While I have you here, like I always say, if you like the podcast, if you want to support, we did start our Patreon. Lots of exclusive stuff to come. We want to hear from you guys out there too. We want to create that online community and make these episodes even better for all you guys. And then don't forget to hit like and follow the podcast, and we'll keep you up to date on everything we're doing. Just like today, I'm going to kind of go over a little bit of my meditation journey so far. You know, a few episodes ago, I kind of started talking about I was just starting to get into meditation, and kind of just want to give you guys a little update, and also talk about Wim Hof. So if no one's ever heard about Wim Hof, he's a Dutch superhero basically, but essentially he's created a breathing technique and method that has been known to do a lot of different things. But anyway, I'll get into that a bit later. But so essentially, so far, I've kind of felt my meditation journey has been going well. You know, it's not like I'm making huge leaps and bounds. I haven't felt like I've necessarily made any giant breakthroughs or anything necessarily, but I feel like I've kind of gotten a little bit better. When I first kind of mentioned going through or starting meditation anyway, kind of mentioned I was really trying to just do a super cold turkey, just kind of do it myself, breathe through some of the things I learned from Jack Cornfield. I tried to put into practice and do all kinds of stuff like that. And so far it's been really good. It's been great to kind of work on that in the morning. But I got my good friends here. I got Christian Aubin always behind the camera.
Hello.
And then I got Jack Williams.
What's up, everybody?
The host of their own podcast.
Yeah.
Which is coming out soon.
Yes, sir. It is out.
It's out now?
By now.
What's it called?
By
the time this episode
out,
airs, right? What's it called, boys? Tell us.
Here's a Thought Podcast.
Here's a Thought Podcast.
Here's a thought. Everyone check it out. By the time this this airs, you guys should go check it out. It's going to be awesome. So, you know, I've had these boys in front of the camera and behind the camera a lot, and I kind of brought them along and wanted them to join in a lot today because they have been doing this Wim Hof Method for a while. Actually, my good buddy Darren Brooks, shout out Darren Brooks, he's been on the podcast before. He's been really interested in it. He actually did a few of the courses and actually went, and I think he can hold his breath for like 4 minutes. So like he's really down. So anyway, but yeah, what up? Oh shit! Sorry,
unrelated.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so Darren Brooks was into it too. So check him out. He's the man, Darren Brooks. Anyway. So, like I said, you know, I kind of just wanted to keep you guys up to date on what I was doing and, you know, bring the boys in and, you know, hear a little bit more from them because, you know, Darren talked about it a lot when him and I were working together and hanging out, but Jack and Christian here really were huge in getting me into it because when I mentioned I was starting the meditation, you know, I kind of told you guys what I was doing and you guys had been doing the Wim Hof for a while. And what kind of got you guys into it?
I don't even really remember, to be honest. I strolled across it on YouTube, I think.
Cool.
Yeah. And then other friends had like kind of talked about it here and there.
Nice.
So one day just dove in and started breathing.
Cool.
Yeah. It was kind of the same thing for me. Kind of ran along, kind of around the same time I was kind of getting into Joe, and to me his work kind of like kind of connected in a weird way. So I started diving. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. So I kind of just started diving into both at the same time.
Nice. Joey Diaz, you mean?
Yeah.
Joey Diaz. Yeah, Uncle Joey.
Yeah, that's
Shout out Uncle Joey. That's awesome because so basically I was telling the boys before we started, I first got into Wim Hof because there was a Vice documentary. Shout out Vice. But they did this wicked documentary back in 2015. Actually, was on YouTube, and they really kind of delved into Wim Hof's life and kind of where he came from. And, you know, like I mentioned, he's Dutch. He was born I was actually born April 20th, 1959, so he's 61. 420 he was born on.
It's my Nan's birthday.
Bless. Oh, no way. Right on.
Shout out Nan.
Shout out Nan.
Shout out Nanny.
What year was she born in?
44.
Okay. So yeah, Wim Hof's like, I guess that puts Wim Hof at 61 right now. So his nickname is the Iceman. He basically got this nickname because he set world records for a lot of like extremely cold events. So like he climbed a mountain, ran a marathon in the Arctic or something in nothing but his shorts. Climbed a mountain with nothing but like bathing suit on. He like swam. He has a record for swimming the furthest like under a frozen lake. And he was saying when he was swimming under the lake, he actually went temporarily blind because his retinas, his corneas froze and he couldn't actually see. So like the last few meters underwater, under the ice, he couldn't see. But he like came up, like they had where he was swimming was like they had a big opening where he was going to come out. Yeah. But still he was like blind under this
crazy,
thing. Right? Super crazy.
Yeah.
So anyway, he's done these crazy feats. Like they did this one where they really isolated all these variables, right? Because obviously it's outdoors. Who knows what's happening? Basically, they created this big plexiglass giant cube, and they filled it with ice. Yes. And he sat in it for like 2 hours.
Yeah. I remember seeing that
2 hours, man. Crazy. Came out. Obviously, no frostbite, no nothing. Like physiologically, you should be getting frostbite at this point, right? But he doesn't. They actually also injected him with like a bacteria, and he like consciously has conscious control over his immune system because of his breathing techniques. So super wild, right? In the documentary, kind of talks about how he kind of started getting into like exploring these methods because his wife committed suicide. He was left with his kids, and he kind of was searching for answers about all this stuff and really trying, because she had mental health issues. She was, I believe, schizophrenic and psychotic, but she obviously had her issues, and Wim, that kind of propelled Wim into this method, and he attributes all his feats to this Wim Hof method, which is basically a combination of frequent cold exposure. So sorry, I dropped my notes.
Notes are down.
My precious notes.
Playing catch the notes.
But he didn't teach me how to catch anyway. Wimmy. But anyway, he so essentially Wim Hof, again, being from Holland, it's a temperate area, and he has the canal. He can go in the ice cold water, but he also suggests using cold showers, artificial ice baths where you can kind of create it yourself. And there's like Anthony Robbins, he has like a cold plunge pool at his house. Like it's like a special little pool that every morning he goes in and he says it shocks his body weight kind of thing. Oh, classic. Jealous. So like he's literally had scientists like observe him do all this stuff. It's not like this is like one of the only dudes out there really that science is really backed up. There's a lot of people that claim a lot of feats and claim a lot of abilities, but once they get kind of put to the test, sometimes they don't come up to snuff. But Wim Hof is actually one of the people who really has, which is super, super interesting. So he's had a lot of scientists watch over him, fully hooked up to machines, especially when they injected him with that bacteria. He was in hospital when they did this because they expected him to have an immune response. It's not supposed to kill you or anything, but you're supposed to have this immune response, and he just didn't have it. Wim Hof was kind of talking about how, like, so after his wife died, he was kind of like searching for meaning, and he was kind of just walking down the street and felt this affinity to the cold water. He said the cold water was like calling him, essentially. So his direct quote was, "I felt this attraction to the cold water, and then after I went in, I felt this understanding, an inside connection, gave me a rush. My mind was free of gibberish." So it completely cleared things up for him. Again, he's probably going through some turmoil at this point, right? And super, super interesting that according to Hof, effective practice of the Wim Hof method involves commitment to both breath work and cold exposure. So again, that breath work is also involved. Like he, in no way is he suggesting, and I also want to say, if you're ever going to check this out, consult a physician. Make sure you've done your research. Don't just jump in. Responsible use of everything is always promoted here on this podcast. But again, that but again, that breath work and knowing again, just understanding that, you know, you're essentially hyperventilating, and that there are some risk factors with that. Just know that, have someone around. If you do faint, just most of the time you're doing this breath work, you're lying down or sitting down, so you're in a fairly safe position. But there have been some deaths. People have drowned, done this stuff in the water. So again, be careful, be smart. But this breathing technique, essentially, in combination with the cold exposure, gives you this kind of inner silence. I don't want to say as far as inner peace, but this inner silence, at least, that can give you a little bit of a respite from potentially, you know, the daily turmoil, or just whatever, you know, whatever is really, because some people don't even understand that they have so much noise kind of going on in their head until it's silenced. It's like many things, right? You don't really understand the light until you've experienced the dark, right? The light does not exist without the dark, and vice versa. So you do have to kind of look at both sides. But this method can essentially, you know, either bring you at least more to the present, or at least quiet things down so much that you can have that moment of tranquility. And essentially, if according to the Wim Hof Method, you can have a lot more control, because that's the biggest thing, is that a lot of people who are dealing with anguish or anxiety or some type of mental distress, there's just a feeling of a loss of control. And I think this method and what Wim Hof says you can achieve is that you can gain this control over your life and over your inner being a little bit more, which is amazing, because we have this huge disconnect, right? We have this huge disconnect with our mind and our body kind of thing. And it's just like, this is something that kind of jolts the system into like immediately feeling that way, which is interesting. And it's really just through breath work. Cold exposure is there too, which is huge. Like, I even look at hot yoga in a sense, like, you know, you're in this new environment that you can't focus on it. It's so extreme that if you focused on it, you'd want to leave. You'd want to jump out of the water. You want to leave the hot yoga room, right? Which is really interesting. So it's almost like, as a survival mechanism, your mind can just go in and just not think about anything. It goes funny, because I've done, back in university, I did ice bath after practice and after games and stuff. Feels good, but really only kind of went like, you know, just sat down in an old hot tub. That was our ice tub, old hot tub that we'd fill with ice from the machine, and just sitting in, and, you know, it would be pretty cold, but for dudes coming in and out of there for like an hour or so, by the end of it wasn't as cold, but whatever. If you got in there, right, it's something. And I'd wear socks and stuff too, like protect the toes, so it was like half. But I kind of experienced, and it would always feel amazing. It would literally, I'd always say it felt like I was swapping out my legs. Like I got a new set of legs after doing the ice bath. And also our trainer also said, don't go past your heart, right? Like, I mean, we're just coming off the field, heart's beating, it's hot, whatever. At the time it's hot, maybe near the end of the season, it's obviously freezing cold. But, so he was always like cautious about us kind of like diving all the way in and kind of going neck deep. But anyway, that was kind of my foray, at least into knowing a little bit about this cold exposure thing and kind of what it can do, and a little bit more into the new science about it too. There are these like cold shock proteins that are released, that your body does release these certain things within the cell when it gets extremely cold, as a survival mechanism, as if your body was experiencing this. Same with heat. There's heat shock proteins as well that will, in sauna or like extreme heat scenarios, these proteins will also be generated. Again, it's just good. They're building blocks of your cells that are just going to kind of be created a little bit more. You're going to have a little bit more of that going on in your system because of these extremes. And it's just kind of a testament to how adaptable our body is, right? Like our body's always trying to achieve this homeostasis, and it's really, really interesting at how adaptable it truly is. But again, right, like if you're going to start getting into this Wim Hof does suggest the cold exposures anyway. He does suggest kind of slowly getting into it, right? Like,
don't rush and don't go crazy.
So how did you guys do cold showers?
Yeah, that's
what's your cold?
That's kind of where it started
I can't
from.
plunge, so for lack of being able to plunge, just jump in the shower. But yeah, like do first 4 days, first week, do 30 seconds.
Right.
Then jump to a minute.
Right.
Minute and a half.
Cool.
2 minutes. I think the longest I've gone is probably 6 minutes.
And you're talking full cold.
Just cold.
Okay.
Don't be too specific when you're getting started, but I would say, but at the same time, don't be a bitch.
Right.
Get cold. Right?
It's going to be cold.
Don't do that go from warm and then oh yeah, it's chilly now. Nah, you barely want to be turning the tap on is what I would say.
So
you want pressure.
Yeah.
That's
okay. I definitely crank it for
once
sure.
I get pressure,
right.
That's it. As long as it's coming out of the faucet.
So full cold.
Yeah, just chilly. Yeah. Because you don't want to be.
Well, I did it a little different. I didn't know no 30-second thing. I didn't even really time it, to be honest with you. I just turned it on full cold blast, as cold as I can possibly go, and stayed in there until I felt I couldn't do it anymore. Which is kind of an extreme way of looking at it.
And are you breathing through it the whole time?
Well, you have to
breathe before.
Okay.
Yeah, you kind of naturally breathe as you do it. Mm-hmm. You have no choice. Your body's naturally trying to heat itself up, so your body does it just on its own and starts just compulsive breathing.
Oh, sick.
Right. So and that kind of gets you in the zone in itself. Sure. I've definitely come very lightheaded in the shower.
Sure.
Times where I've been holy fuck, maybe I shouldn't go that deep.
I've cut rounds. I've got to second round out of 3 or 4 and been nah, I'm done. Because I'm just so I've sat down afterwards and room is spun.
Right.
I've had that. There's definitely the side of caution, but go within your limits and again, don't be
know
afraid
your limits and play within it.
But I'll tell you one thing: you feel amazing after every single one of them.
Sure.
Yeah.
So why not?
I went with Darren Brooks again. Shout out Darren Brooks. When we went to around Webster's Falls, so it was in a rushing river.
Nice.
We're gonna post the video on Patreon, so join the Patreon if you want to see the video. But patreon.com/the Bigmark Podcast. But anyway, so when we went, we found this little spot to go in. It was still frozen. This was a couple months, or at least a month ago now. But anyway, we jumped in, and it was I could inhale, I could breathe in normally, but my exhale was it was it was really jaunty. I expected to be wanting to inhale more, but it was almost my body was hyperventilating on the exhale, which was super interesting. And again, I was up to my neck in the water, going after it big time, and I only did it for a minute.
How'd you get over the trouble exhale?
It didn't really bother me so much, but I was just kind of I just tried to normalize it. So I tried to just not make it so jaunty.
That's my what I was saying before we started, that's my moment where I'm oh yeah, I'm gasping for the breath almost to try and catch the moment and calm the body down and calm the shakedown.
Right.
And it's at that moment where I'm almost like a click where you're oh right, calm it fully, find the breath, track it, and then it's a full almost to the moment, to the breath sort of thing. Right. But yeah, he'll, if you've done Wim's beginner videos, he's track the breath as well. Cool. So I find that's always when you're gasping for it, on that exhale, sort of thing, you're oh right, just track it. And then go through that.
Yeah, and I noticed I was focusing very much on the breath. Don't get me wrong, but then after I was just kind of looking around you're in the forest.
Yeah.
Right, and then you're just kind of looking around
That's why I don't like
Darren
the shower.
What's that?
Because I don't like the shower for that reason, because you're you're just stuck. Right. I'm looking at my shower wall while also not being completely covered.
Nice curtains.
So for me, the shower, it's the air is more difficult than the water.
Sure.
The parts where my body is bare.
Right.
I'm oh wait, no, I need to get water somehow on it. So I'm spinning. I'm doing 360s in the shower. Just going all right, face, head, shoulders, back, body, boom.
Doing the spins and shit.
I feel when you
under the armpit,
when you dunk,
the worst, dude. That's so cold.
Oh jeez. like I feel like when you dunk, you can't escape it anywhere, right? Like
exactly.
I love dunking. I would rather dunk.
I would much prefer dunking for sure.
Yeah, we'll have to go.
It's everything in a flash.
Yeah, we'll have to go.
So it's like that initial, the body has to then like figure itself out right at that point. And how you do that.
Well, that's what it is. That's like the whole thing with these extremes, right? It is giving your body like, it's like fight or flight. It's like literally you're gonna either freeze here or like. I think the most fascinating thing with this whole Wim Hof thing is really he's defying like physiology. Like again, like I said, he spent time in this ice where you should be getting frostbite. Like people have gotten frostbite. We know this.
Yeah.
Many times. We know how long it takes roughly. We know at what temperature all this happens. For many reasons, but like, you know, a lot of climbers and a lot of all kinds of stuff, people out in war and like weird stuff, but we have a general idea that that's what happens to the human body. And like Wim Hof is like blatantly defying this and literally teaching people, like this Vice documentary, he taught the whole crew like over a month or so. I don't even know how long the period, wasn't very long, and they ended up climbing this mountain in Poland in their friggin' underwear. The whole crew, the cameraman, the producers, the hosts. It was just like Wim Hof taught them how to do it. So it's the power. There's got to be some power of the mind, right? Like there's a faith. There is.
I think that's more so
a tough word, but again, there is this aspect where you're really believing that you can do this too, which is super, super fascinating because
maybe that's all you need.
Well, it's like to go back on what you said earlier. Like Wim says you need commitment to the breath and the cold, but he also says like you need commitment. Like period.
Sure.
So it's like not always connected to the cold and the breath work. It's like commitment almost to the idea as well. And that's what you'll learn through this is like it's uncomfortable for sure to do the cold and everything, but that's commitment. You're going to go that, you're going to do the daily sessions, but then eventually you'll get to the point where you adopt a new narrative, for lack of a better way of saying it, and you'll commit yourself to that. Like, oh yeah, most of these things that I think will throw me off, these stress like flashes, let's say,
right,
it's like, well, I've already kind of put myself in uncomfortable scenarios willingly, and I found my way through them. So later on in this time I'm good. Like I'll flow through, find the breath,
and that's amazing, man. Like again, I think we can be so afraid to challenge ourselves, right? There's so many ways, like especially doing extreme cold, right? For instance, because we're, you know, living in Canada, we're always trying to stay warm. Everyone's wearing jackets. We're staying inside with heat. We're very much trying to get away from the cold. People complain about the cold all the time.
I hate it.
Right? And it does suck, especially like in southern Ontario, where it can be so humid and it just sucks. But like Wim Hof is telling us to embrace this, and I think that there's so much more to that where you can take it as embrace the difficulty, embrace the challenge that most of us want to avoid. There's all these things that we want to avoid, and essentially some of that challenge is good. Most of that challenge is good, really. Obviously stuff that's going to hurt yourself you don't want to do, or hurt others you don't want to do, but we're made and we're so adaptive. The reason why we have these cold shot proteins, these heat shot proteins built into our DNA, and this ability to create them is because we're meant to be in these challenging scenarios, right? Like nature is heavy. Nature's metal, right? There's that Instagram page, right, where it's like it's hardcore. You know, nature can be red in tooth and claw, in the sense that it can be survival of the fittest out there. Now, obviously, we all know that there's so much more, and we've talked about all the love aspect and all the cooperation aspect of that's got us here as a civilization. But the reason why we had to figure all that stuff out as well is because we've met a lot of challenges in our experiences, in the vast history of just existence itself. You know, whatever we've evolved from, whatever other species that exists out there, they go through hardships, and you know, humans have created these amazing lives. And don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of humans on this planet that are not living this ideal life. I totally understand that, and I know I'm coming from a first world scenario where things are a lot better. But again, that challenge needs to come out because we've removed that challenge from our life. And I think us coming back to that, and that's what Wim Hof is essentially saying, is that go to the cold. The cold has answers. It's scary and it's daunting and sometimes it hurts a little bit, but the feeling afterwards, again, the feeling that you get when you come out. So the feeling I had when I stepped out of that river, like I didn't feel cold. I wasn't shivering. My fingers and toes were numb, but I didn't feel cold. I was like literally walking on snow and it did not feel cold. And, you know, I took my time. I had to like dry off and stuff. And I wasn't like rushing to put my clothes back on. I thought I'd be like freezing when I step out, but just you feel blissful. And again, you know, physiologically, all your capillaries and arteries have constricted, so you don't actually have a lot of blood flow to your extremities where you would feel stuff. So that's a lot of the physiology. But again, the mental aspect of it too. You've experienced this tranquility and this quiet and this bliss that it does last for a while. And again, I was only in there for a minute, and when Darren said, "Hey, the minute's over," in my head, I was kind of like, I feel like I could probably be in here for a little bit longer. But, you know, I got out. Darren only did a minute too, and he's the man. He went in there fully up to the neck and, like, had his eyes closed and stuff. I found, like, when I had my eyes closed, I was focusing too much, right?
I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah. I found when I closed my eyes, I started focusing more on the cold. But when I opened, and again, like I said, you can look around, you can look at, like, friggin' tree and be like, "Ooh, tree."
Well, we said that the other day when you were like, "Yeah, I do my breath work with my eyes open," and I was like, "That's interesting," because I'm always eyes closed.
Right. Yeah, and I find with I don't know, with the breath work too, I find closing them, I can't. So let's get there in a sec, actually, because basically the Wim Hof Method, we'll get into a little bit. I'm not a practitioner of this method. I do practice it, but I'm not a practitioner. Anyway, essentially, it involves taking in deep breaths and breathing out less than you breathed in. So there's different people are going to kind of vary that, but take it as you will. Breathe out less than you breathe in. So if you're going to breathe in 100%, you know, only breathe out 80 or less. You can breathe out 20%. Whatever you want to do, breathe out less air than you breathe in. So again, you're going to be doing this in a rhythmic pattern. Wim Hof has an amazing video on his website, thewimhofmethod.com, and or on YouTube too, where it's a guided breathing session. Super cool. Wim Hof himself takes you through it. He suggests you either do it lying down or sitting, and it's about 30, right? Big giant inhales with exhaling less than you're inhaling, like doing it at a fairly quick pace. And then at the end of that round of 30, you hold your breath. So in this guided breathing session, there's like a 1 minute round and 2 1 minute and 30 second rounds. You can pause the video because some people can do it more. Like I said, Darren was at least up to 4 minutes, which isn't like wild because they say the brain can't have oxygen for more than 3 minutes. Obviously, your heart's still beating. Obviously, you still have oxygen. Like, it's funny, you think when you're breathing in, like you're only getting a very small portion of oxygen that actually exists in the lungs. It's only the surface that's actually contacting your lung tissue. So when you breathe out, you're breathing out lots of oxygen, a bunch of CO2, but there's still lots of oxygen in that air you breathed in. So you still have some of that vestigial air in your lungs. So you're not without oxygen. That's the thing. But again, because you're not breathing, which is it's breathing is very interesting because it's conscious and unconscious, right? Like everyone listening there, we've all been breathing this whole time until I'm saying this right now. Now we're all conscious of our breath, right? You know it coming in, you can feel it going out, but before it was just going. Right, and that will continue on as I keep talking. You get distracted again, and you're going to keep going. But we can hold our breath for a little bit. We can vary the breath consciously and unconsciously. We all know our breath changes, obviously, when we start working out or whenever we need more oxygen for whatever reason. A big yawn. They kind of say is like if you're feeling low on oxygen, that yawn is that big, huge inspiration, which will actually take in a little bit more oxygen. Your breath is actually, your breathing rate is actually moderated by the amount of CO2 that's in your blood. It's not modulated by how much oxygen you require, right? So everyone thinks, oh, I need to breathe to get more oxygen. You're actually breathing fast to breathe out more CO2, which is actually where your fat goes too. Fun breathing facts. When you fat, you're working out, you're losing fat, where do you think it goes? You actually, if you follow the chemical processes, by the end of it, you actually breathe out the fat as CO2, which is very, very interesting. Krebs cycle. Anyway, so again, physiologically, you do have a little bit of air in that, but when you're holding your breath and you will have this sensation of like, I gotta breathe. But if you train, like I've noticed, I've only been doing this for a couple weeks now, but I've noticed I'm getting better and better at kind of quieting the mind, right? Because that's going to be about as loud as your mind is going to be. It's going to be screaming at you to breathe, right? But I think that doing this and doing it often, that's how you're going to kind of strengthen the mind to deal with other scenarios where your mind's going to be screaming at you to do something that you don't want to do or whatever, and you got to step up to the plate and you can't have your mind all haywire. At least you're going to be a little bit more again, it's all about that control. You're going to have a little bit more control over things, which is super cool. So basically, again, like I mentioned, when you're doing it, it is essentially hyperventilation. So again, be in a safe place when you do it. When you're breathing, you're going to do it consciously. When you do breathe, you want to breathe from the belly and then up into the chest and then almost up into the top of the head. So you're taking this really deep and then shooting it. So you're going to feel that go in the belly, and you're going to feel it in the chest, and you're going to feel that even more in the head. You have all this more, right?
But
like,
no
because people think, oh, I breathed in all the way, but you can actually go more. Actually, when I was a kid, I had like exercise-induced asthma, so I had to go into this, like, I had to go to a doctor to get tested. And I don't know if you guys have ever been tested for asthma, but they put you in like this little pod. It's like this clear pod, and you put this tube in your mouth, and you're supposed to like blow into it for like a certain period of time. Take as much air in as you can at a time, and it's measuring all these different things about your lungs and your lung capacity and your VO2 max and all this kind of cool stuff. And I think I had to go on a bike a little bit and like get breathing a little bit hard because again, it was exercise induced, so they had to kind of induce it. But anyway, I remember learning, like, because at one point he's like, breathe out, and then you go, and he's like, keep going. And I was like 7, so like I'm like, what? And you have so much more air to breathe out because you actually have this thing. It's like tidal volume, I think it's called. Anyway, it's this like constant volume that always exists in your lungs, right? There's always just going to be like a little bit of air just because your esophagus is hard, so you can't actually push any more air. There'll always be a little bit of air in your lungs. And then when you inspirate, like when you breathe in, inspire, you can breathe in more. Again, that's that belly to chest to top of the head, right? So you breathe fully in and then just relax it out, right? It's not like you're pushing it out. Just kind of relax, let it go, as Wim Hof always says, let it go. Let it go. Let it go.
All the love, all the power.
Yeah, it says here, when you exhale, don't force it. But again, fall and have that steady rhythm. Count your breaths until you reach 30, like we said. And after the final exhale, you're going to hold that breath. And you're going to hold that breath for as long as you can, really. And what's that?
Exhale.
It's exhale.
Oh, sorry.
Hold on the exhale.
But don't exhale fully. Right?
He just says breathe out and hold.
So on the final exhale, refrain from breathing. Yeah, sorry. On the final exhale, refrain from breathing back in. Hold your breath as long as you can. But that's the don't breathe out more than you can breathe in still. So you still have some air in there.
Sure.
Right?
Mm-hmm. So it'll be like last breath.
Yeah.
And then let it go a little bit and then stop.
Hold.
And then you're holding it. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you're holding that for as long as you can. And you'll probably, if you're trying this for the first time, you're probably not going to you might not even get to 30 seconds. But that's totally cool. You're going to feel those internal feelings. You're going to start to get more comfortable with them. I know, like I said, I've only done this for a couple weeks now, and I can do the 130. I'm not too bad. I can get to the 130, not bad, especially by the second round of it. But again, it's still like, oh man, like, I have that feeling of really, really wanting to breathe again. Really, really wanting to breathe. I have experience, so this is one thing that I'd like to hear from you guys, because when, like I was saying, like, if I breathe out too much on that final exhale, I'm brutal. Like, I'm not even going to last 30 seconds. Yeah. But if there's still, like, a little bit of air, then I can last a lot longer. So that's the weird thing. That's kind of where I'm stuck.
I usually do the breathe out, relax, and hold.
Right.
And then when I get to, like, the 30-second mark, it's, like, around when he says, if you need to pause this video, like, when he, like, gets to that part, I fully push out my last breath and hold for that last, like, 30 seconds.
Okay.
And, like, almost, like, you know, just to push your body a bit more.
Okay.
On that, so, yeah.
Because that's interesting, because I saw it on
your last
on
breath,
Joe too.
Like something to
and
remember
he like
for
just
not
like held
pushing
his breath.
Right.
Yeah.
He like didn't exhale very much, and then he held his breath for like a couple minutes.
I think there's
he had like a lungs full of air.
There's definitely something to be said where, like, as you get further into it, like, you'll adapt it to yourself. Like,
100%.
on the last round, like, I don't do any time on the last round. I just go as long as I can on the hold.
Right. Cool.
Just to, like, stretch it every day, almost.
And do you feel like that tingling and stuff in your hands and stuff that he talks about?
That stuff's minor now.
Yeah, that's like
that's stuff that you
felt that
bottom
of the barrel.
Ever.
That's every time, like, bottom of the barrel for me though.
Cool.
Yeah.
Like, I see a lot more because I do close-eyed as well.
Right.
Like, I start to see, like, I pay attention to, like, my visual field.
Sure.
Because there's obviously, like, things are happening there, like, not like clear visuals, but rather in the darkness, in the black, you just see light. I kind of just do the same thing. I kind of, at this point now, I get into like a state where I can just go into like a visualization movie. Like, I can make a movie, and I almost kind of use that as like a manifestation tool in a sense, to kind of get like amazing feelings and like that whole like emotional and like the whole heart coherence mix in with all that too. Very cool. Then like so much so to the point where like I can feel the cold concrete on like my feet if I go into like, it's so, and then like time just goes away at that point. I don't even think about the breath.
Cool.
And
like when you don't think about the breath, you're not worried about the time.
Right.
It's like almost as if I start to think about the time is when my body starts to think, oh shit, right, we've been holding our breaths for a minute.
Sure.
Oh, and it starts to kind of do like a little shake.
You'll definitely get to the point where like the time is gone, like the time is less focused.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when you get into that stage,
because at the beginning it's helpful, like the time and the guide, it's like helpful to just lead you. Sure. But at a certain point, like you're just going to be breathing in more than you're breathing out, and then you're going to be doing some breath holds. Like there's no, like Wim Hof is like a great way to put it, but at the end of the day, it's like breath work.
Right.
And once you start realizing that, you'll make it your own. You'll use, like, I love Wim. I use his beginner video every day for it, just for like background, just because he's like, 30 seconds, almost there.
Right.
Like he just puts you in a vibe for it.
Sure.
You know what
for
I mean?
Sure.
But
then again, I see what Christian's saying too, because it can also be distracting. I've even noticed that, where it's almost like, what, 30 seconds? Like, shit, I don't know if I'm going to make it.
Right. Yes,
and then, and then you're just thinking and thinking and thinking, right?
In all those moments, like I do like the snap, like I'll literally snap in Wim Hof to like every time he talks. After I'll like snap my fingers just to like get away from his voice, and it's back to like the all right, like full moment. We're right here. Right. But yeah, going off the manifestation thing, there's times where I'll focus my attention on a part of my body while I'm doing it, and I'll almost like imagine, like, because I'm doing knee recovery right now, I've like imagined my knee recovering, almost like putting the knee back together. Cool. But another thing my friend John said recently is like sometimes in the hold, he'll imagine gaining breath from a certain area of his body. So he'll be like, I can feel the breath in my heart. I can feel the breath in my feet now. Cool. Like you're
Oh shit! I just did that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's what.
Wow.
So try that.
That's
people.
what Wim said too. Is like,
wow, I did it in my calves, dude. That was a weird feeling.
Like Wim talks about that too, right? Where it's
cool.
where it's like become aware of your heartbeat. And
really
become aware of the blood rushing
blood.
through your veins and stuff, which is super cool.
You'll be able to feel your cheekbones.
I think truly what all this stuff is too, with all this exposure and all this breath work, like you're just reconnecting the mind and body.
Yeah.
Because there's this major disconnect, especially if I think that was, that's another huge benefit of sport, is that you're constantly honing that mind body connection, because it has to be sharp for what you think in your mind, for you to make that happen in the reality of the game. So your mind body connection has to be super sharp, because there's times, and this happens with musicians too, where you're like, my mind is better than my body. Like, I can think better than my body can do. So what that is it's conscious incompetence is actually what the level of learning is. So that means you know what you don't know. But what you want to do is unconscious competence. So you're not thinking about it, but you're doing everything, right? So but that's how you always keep putting yourself into the scenario where you're like, I want to be better. Like John Mayer has said, I've heard him talk about guitar, where he's like, I'm much better in my head. So when I'm playing, I'm constantly criticizing myself because I know I can be better. And you'll always have that in your mind. If you're going to be great at something, you'll always have that mindset where you're like, I'm better in my head than I am. But with something like music or something like sport, you can kind of put that whatever's in your head into reality, right? In a certain game scenario, you can be like, I'm going to make this play happen. And if you're really in tune with your body, if you're like a LeBron James or someone else at the height of your game, and you're one of the best trained athletes in your sport, what you think can kind of happen a lot easier. And you're making that happen, and there's a bit of a manifestation aspect to that too. But again, it's this true mind-body connection where literally you're so in tune that when you do this with your body, this is going to happen, right? I think what's happening when you don't have that constant, whether you're in sport or whether you're in something else, when you don't have that constant challenge, you have this disconnect between the mind and body. And especially because we have so many things in our life that make our life easier physically. If you don't have a very laborious job, you're not really, you're not putting your body into really challenging scenarios. And you might be challenging your mind as much as you want. You might be doing Sudoku every day and watching documentaries and learning all kinds of stuff and in school and this and that and this. But if you're not training your body to be in sync with the mind, it's not even, because you can even be going to the gym and working out and still be lacking this mind-body connection. You got to be challenging yourself in the sense that both those things are working at the same time. Both the mind and body are being challenged at the same time. And either in sport and certain other practices like yogas in essence can do that, because you have to quiet the mind to quiet the body, because you're in uncomfortable positions and your mind's going to be screaming at you, and you got to focus through that. And I think the Wim Hof Method is another way too, right? Because you're in the cold and you're like, I can't think about this. You're challenging your mind to be like, all right, how can you take yourself out of a scenario, look at it in a clear way, right? Because that's the more practical aspects of this, right? You can kind of take yourself out of a moment and look at it regardless of emotion, not necessarily apart from emotion, but bringing that out and not letting things get in the way, and looking at a scenario with a new perspective. Because that's what we're all talking about with everything too, right? We're all talking about changing your perspective, making sure that everything isn't always, making sure you're not looking at everything the same way all the time. That's why we do stuff like this. That's why you have friends. You want to knock this stuff off. You want to bounce this off people's heads, right? Because when you get on your own, you're doing everything, you get in this echo chamber, again, you're just widening that gap between the mind and body. And Wim Hof Method, super really interesting. If you've never heard of it before today, do a little bit more research, watch that Vice documentary, super, super cool. It's on YouTube, but we'll put the link below. But, challenge yourself, go out there, the cold, whatever's scaring you, it's actually your friend. The unknown is unknown. Shouldn't be scary. Why should we be scared of something that's unknown? But if you face your fear and you go head on into it, actually dive into what you're avoiding the most, you will learn so much about yourself, and hopefully you'll start to evolve, and you'll start to just, again, maybe there'll be one more layer to that. This can be a lifelong thing where we're constantly trying to figure out layers and peel off different layers and try and get to the root of it. And that's love, and that's spreading love and choosing love over fear. And if we all do that together, we can definitely change the world and change ourselves one day at a time, for sure. But thanks for listening. That's kind of brings us to the end of today's. Thanks, boys, for joining.
Thanks for having me,
brother, man. Thank you. Much love, dude.
Loved having your guys' perspective on everything. It's always great.
Yeah, man.
But if you like today's podcast, like I said, please support the patreon.com, the Bigmark Podcast. Like it. Hit that bell for those notifications. Subscribe.
Big M.
You guys love it. I love you.
Get it.
We'll see you soon. Peace.